Charlie DeMers is going to be on this one. If you want to share the link, we'll make sure that Carol gets the link because he's been on the Debaters a lot. I know that she's a big Debaters fan.
Did you share it on Facebook at all?
I did not share the link on Facebook.
Did you
I just started up the YouTube.
send me a link?
Oh, I didn't send you a Zoom link. That's the YouTube link. And there's a Zoom link.
shawl on.
Yeah. 5 days count the day we go there? Like, does the 5 days count tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Push that in.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday we'll be getting it. Is that what we've agreed, or Tuesday?
Monday, I thought, but we can do Tuesday. Well, yeah, I think Monday.
Okay. I love these like Renaissance paintings of Bible stories that are more or less just an excuse to paint boobs. Like I have a painting here of Jael killing Sisera.
But of course,
And it's just
with
like
her boobs out.
just got
That's the way we do
for
it.
funsies. Like you're not gonna murder a guy.
You can't do with your boobs out. Can you really do it at all? Anything else feels like oppression.
You're packed?
I'm waiting till tomorrow to pack my bedding because I want to actually
Oh
sleep
yeah,
comfortably.
that's not unreasonable.
Yep.
Are you close to the way?
Yep.
Hey Dave, thanks so much for this, bud. Oh, I need to unmute you. There, you should be
Uh,
unmuted now.
Yeah, I can. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Could you
Perfect.
hear me the whole time, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me. I'm. Do you want me to record on my end too, so you have clean audio of me, or?
Nah, that's
No.
fine.
I don't know how professional you want to be, Dan.
Not at all. I like all.
I've like set up a studio here where I have like a lamp like right in my face so you can see my face, because I'm like doing like a comedy show every like week or two. Like I've been doing the Vancouver Meltdown.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah, because that's run by Morris Bartlett.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, but nobody's in the bar, right? Like that's not.
No, they're just running it separate.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Okay, just a sec. Teddy's
in
gonna come in
here.
here. I'm gonna unmute Teddy.
Hi, Teddy.
Hi.
And I am going to make you the host. Cool. So we're just waiting on Charlie. Yeah, thanks for stepping in last minute. It was Noor.
Yeah,
He
I
like
mean-
an hour ago, he's like, I'm in the hospital. I effed up my back. And I'm like, wow.
yeah,
Like,
that's
How badly do you have to F up your back now to go to the hospital? Like,
yeah. That's a choice. It's not even like before. It used to be like, yeah, let's just go, but now it's like, oh, I gotta weigh this.
yeah. Like, what are the risks here
Yeah.
versus the gains? The gains being like what, opiates, and the negative effects being like potential death. So
So I've never
and
done
not
one
having
of
to
these.
do my podcast, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So. So how does this work? Like, does it just automatically go live on YouTube? I've never actually done one.
It's live on YouTube right now, and then normally what I'll do is and what I have done is I'll pull it down and edit it a little bit, and then I'll put it back up on YouTube. But almost nobody watches on YouTube, it seems. And
YouTube is a very like limited.
yeah, so I like having it there for the like 4 people who use it, but most of the I have like the last time I checked there was like 700 podcast subscribers, so it's not
Really?
bad. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Like considering it's like still really new.
This is episode 5. So it's pretty cool. Like it's weird because the same thing happened with Ben and I. Like
Yeah.
when we were doing 30-minute week, we had like I think we were getting an average of about 5,000 downloads an episode, but we never heard from anyone. Like not via social media, nobody complained, nobody taught. Like we had the least in like, and I don't know if all of these people like just hit subscribe and then never listened to it, but like
So it was still like downloading to their thing.
who knows? And they might have just been listening and never talking, because like I gotta be honest with you, I've listened to Bill Simmons' podcast for like 10 years and I've never once like sent him a thing, like that's not.
Yeah.
So so I'm guessing that they were all out there, but yeah, so that's the same thing. So in some ways it's not unusual with this, where it's just like, are these real people? Are these bots? Are these,
Yeah.
But it's a number that I can claim, so I'm just going to continue to claim it until somebody tells me I can't. So yeah. And okay, so Charles is getting here. He's connecting to audio, and I'm going to unmute him. Hello, Charlie.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being here, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So just to introduce you to who's here, this is my wife, Teddy. She is sort of like running the boards and stuff like that.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Charles.
And it's technically the
Can you
host.
make me host, Dan?
I thought I already did.
You did not.
I did not. Oh, sorry. Make host. Change host. There we go. And then do you know Dave Ray?
No, I don't
I
think.
don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dave
Hello?
also does comedy here in Edmonton. You were supposed to be out with Noor Kidwai, but he messaged me like an hour ago and was like, I'm in the hospital. I effed up my back.
Oh no.
Yeah, crazy. And then he sent me a picture of himself in the hospital to make sure that he wasn't lying. And I'm like, dude, I don't.
Dude.
The stakes are not that high on this show.
Well, and even if you were lying to me, like I don't. Oh, okay. And this is my mom, who I'm gonna leave on mute.
Oh. That is definitely that's in violation of at least one commandment for sure.
No. This is the
She asked to be on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This is
This is honoring her.
This is honoring of my parents because like this is the only Zoom thing they do. They
Oh.
occasionally FaceTime and then they come in for this Bible study. And yeah, but like they also but they want to be able to talk to each other and ultimately not pay attention. So it's easier to do. And that's easier to do if they're muted. Otherwise, then they're just like, all we would hear is them arguing about like, make the thing work louder, quieter.
Oh, if they knew how to turn off the mute, Dan.
Oh, I know. I'll hear about it, I'm sure. But how are you guys doing? I know Dave is keeping himself busy with lots of projects during quarantine. Are you also, Charlie, keeping yourself busy?
Well, I am. We're in that situation of quarantining with a child, so
Right.
it's. My wife works for the BC Center on Substance Use, so she's got a very, very progressive and very health focused employer. So they were earlier on
Right.
work from home. Everybody will be on full salary. We understand that productivity is going to be affected, but so she's been working full through, and I kind of took more or less the first month essentially off.
Yeah.
And basically kind of after Easter, we have been since Easter trying to do a sort of kind of tag team of work. She does a few hours of work, I do a few hours of work. We try and do about 2 hours of school-ish assignments. Our daughter's 6 and she has they're doing 2 like hour-long live sessions per week with the class.
Right.
And then the rest is just kind of try and do a couple of things, try and do a couple of and I mean the nice thing is it's kindergarten, so I get to like
Right.
I mean for the first few weeks it was actually kind of amazing because it was she's just learned to read in both French and English, and so I've just been watching her in real time learning to read, and so it was like this.
Right.
It couldn't have happened at a more like exciting time. Although I told everybody, it was like, Jesus, I've been back at church for 2 years and already I'm a homeschooler. This is like fast as possible.
They gotcha.
Yeah, like this is how quickly. But it's funny because there seems to be like 5 or 6 like segments of experience of quarantine, and everybody's experience will be identical within whatever quadrant they're in. If you're single, or you're a couple with no kids, or you have kids, or you're whatever, like if you whatever demographic you're in, you're going through the exact same thing as everybody else in your demographic.
Yeah.
But you're mutually unintelligible to the people outside of your demographic.
Yeah.
Well, so people who are just like, I don't know what to do with all this time. It's like, I have not watched an episode of television in 4 weeks. Like, it's been wild.
Yeah, it's even like we have 3 kids. Our oldest is 15 and our youngest is 9.
Okay.
So it's a completely different experience for us even, right? Like
Right.
we can look back in memory and horror of like having how tough it would have been then had this been going on. But like really now it's kind of easy, you know? It's like
Right.
the older 2 are just kind of, our job is to be like, did you do your schoolwork today? And
Yeah.
you're both pretty internally motivated, so it's like, yeah, they got it done. And then the younger one has a little bit more school, but even his is like a PowerPoint set like thing that he has to go through every day. And then and like he just follows it exactly, like he kind of loves structure, so he
Yeah.
just follows it exactly to the T. Like even the point where the next slide is like, recess, go play outside for 15 minutes. And he's
Oh,
like,
nice.
okay. And he'll, like go outside.
That's
He's like,
awesome.
I have to do recess now. So yeah. And then we've watched, like, our family thing is like, and it's kind of fun because nobody has any activities. Like our regular life was like just running around. Like my job was essentially driving children all over the city to the things that they were in.
Right.
And now it's like every evening we watch a cooking show together. You know, like
That's nice.
yeah, it was actually
Yeah.
kind of cool. We got through all the Great British Baking shows on CBC Gem, and then you know, and now we're like trying to be like, what's the next cooking show? And it's sort of neat that it's like, yeah. So that part's been kind of cool. I'll miss that, but yeah,
Yeah.
even like the season that you're in with like a 6-year-old, that is just way more intense than what we're going through.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, they're pretty self-sustaining. Sorry, one of them is looking like
No,
he wants
no.
to talk to me, but yeah.
Dave, are you on your own, or are you with a family, or?
I have a roommate.
Yeah.
But you know, both of us are essentially like I have vastly reduced hours, and then you know, so I'm spending my time, you know, most of my day. If I don't have to work, then I try to like make a video to post up on my you know comedian page just to pass the time and like try to engage things, and you know, still working on a Fringe play even though Fringe got canceled. You know?
Oh man, yeah.
So that's just going to be like, oh, we'll just do it for later down the line. So it's like this weird holding pattern, yet you're still kind of working on stuff, but it's like your deadline's been pushed back so far. It's like, well, what do you do? So
It also just feels like anything you're working on, like, because I
so low.
yeah,
So low.
And also it just feels like you're writing about, like, if you're writing about anything that's not this, it feels crazy. And yet I also just feel like the last thing I'm going to want to hear about once this is over is anything having to do with this.
I'm not looking forward to the first stand-up comedy show.
No.
I am
Totally.
dreading. I'm already tired of the jokes I am going to hear, and I have not heard yet. I'm tired of them now.
Yeah. The one thing
I'm going to hear some hot take by Ben Prue, and I will walk
Yeah.
out. I'm already
one-
tired of what he's going to talk about.
the one
just
thing
had a
I'm really
baby. Ben's wife just has a baby. He doesn't even know that there's a quarantine happening right now.
It's the same.
Ben's like, I have
Except for you can't
another
have any
human
people
being.
over.
Yeah.
There's when you have children, there's this weird like year and a half where you're just like, I felt like I was supposed to get an email that told me how to be a grown-up, and it never came.
Yeah. Just keep checking spam folders.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
has gotta
I
be.
must have missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like this had what, like I genuinely expected that like at some point in my life I was gonna get this email that was like, dear Mr. Taylor, you're now a grown up. Like, please conduct yourself as such. You know, this is how often you're supposed to change your furnace filter. And,
Yeah.
you know, and here's a
feels like it
$25
comes with your
gift
first
certificate
tax
to
return.
Mark's Work Warehouse. and
Yeah.
then away you go. But it just doesn't happen that way. So Ben is like totally locked in on like, my kid is 14 pounds. Is that enough pounds? Is that not enough pounds? Yeah.
Oh, man.
But totally, like there's the like quarantine hack is already developing in our brains.
I just can't remember. I can't wait for the first, like, you remember it was until like 2011. People go, so any of you guys here on Facebook? Like, yes,
Yes.
all of society is Facebook. So
We were there.
yeah, I can't wait for the first comic to be like, so you guys heard about this coronavirus? Like, that's the line that I can't wait for.
Yeah. So
It was really big in Toronto.
yeah. My girlfriend social distanced with me so much she left me.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's not funny and sad. That is
Well, the thing that I'm having a fun time with is the play that we're writing for Fringe, and it'll go into the next Fringe when it comes up. Is the premise is it's set in the post-apocalypse, and so it's going to be weirdly, but it has nothing to do with the virus. It's just going to be the post-apocalypse, but it'll be like weirdly like fitting. So I'm looking very much forward to it. So
yeah. Like, because we normally have at least one comedian on the show, and one of the things I'm interested in, because I don't feel this, like and maybe it's just because I'm busy with other things, but a lot of comics are feeling like, ugh, I need the public affirmation that comes from an audience, and I'm pretty lucky in that I don't feel that necessarily as a drive. It's more I want to make things, like I like having that part, and this isn't as much fun as it is to make things up in front of an audience and get that immediate feedback. But like, do you guys feel that like applause thing draining, and you're like going into your roommates or spouses and being like, can you just like applaud me for doing nothing? I'm just gonna leave the room and then walk back in, and
I demand
laugh
that,
rolling our eyes right now.
I demand that as a husband, not as a I demand
Did you
to be
do
applauded
something
for
praiseworthy?
nothing. Yeah, no. The applause for nothing is a spousal privilege, not a professional privilege. No, I feel like I'm with you in that sense of like I don't really I am worried about, I had about like maybe 40 new minutes since my last like recording of stuff, and I feel like all of that is gonna first marble with fat and then really just go fully like I'm gonna forget all the like I'll be able to find an old set list and go, oh yeah, there was that joke and that joke and that joke, but all of the sinew I'm worried is gonna be lost, and I'm a little worried about that, but the not so much the I mean it'd be nice to get up on stage because it's fun, but I don't find and I used to do these little like it was not super rare for me to go maybe not a month but a few weeks and not necessarily get up on stage. And I had just finished a writing project, and this show came out, this cartoon that I had done a voice on, that the new season came out right as this thing was starting, and so there were things that like it felt like, oh, here's something to share, or here's a like, and I miss like the feeling of being live on stage. What I worry about is getting more like too comfortable in the like soft quiet of home, and not feeling the draw to go back out when it's okay to go out.
Yeah, the like falling, like where it's just like, oh, this is where doing shows become, that happened to me for a little while at one point, where it's just like I gotta leave the house, like and that was pre-quarantine, where it's just like this is so nice, like we're getting along fine, and and it's just like I have to go put on pants and then like get in my car and drive to another building, and then like all that kind of stuff. It's like
totally,
I'm like I can totally see if there wasn't that made you want to do it, you know, you don't have to. I mean, the other thing too is just like, am I going to get up on stage after this? Because I have a pretty quick internal turnover where it's like I fall out of love with my own material pretty quickly just because I get bored, and I'm like, and I'm a little bit like, I'm supposed to do Winnipeg in August with a set that I wrote like a year ago, and I'm like, am I gonna do like it's gonna be August, and I'm gonna be like, none of this is so like, I'm gonna be on stage being like, this is so stupid. Like none of this matters anymore. Like none of these.
Yeah,
things.
but then they can play it in 9 months by the time it takes them to get it on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I know for myself, like that's why I've been making my videos every day. I think it's like, as you're saying, Dan, I like just creating, like making the thing, and not necessarily the laughter itself. I don't miss that part.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing you're not used to laughter, Dave.
Yeah, I know. It's very true. This is what's been a bummer for me, actually. Look, I can make a video and like it gets like 1 or 2 likes, and that's it. That doesn't bother me. What I don't get is I'll put up a video and then people just put like unnecessarily mean comments on it. It's like, well, come on, like you didn't pay me to watch this video, you know.
No,
like,
I know.
Give me
just let me be alone in a corner and yell into the emptiness of the internet, but you have to come and ruin the thing I'm trying to pass my time with.
Yeah, to be
the only bothersome thing about this time.
Yeah, well, it's the only one. Yeah,
For
that's
me as a creator, I should say.
Yeah, well, but that's a weird internet phenomenon of like being angry, like the inability to just scroll past stuff you don't like. You know, like,
yes.
you can, like why can't you just be like, that's not for me? You know, like I don't.
Yeah.
You know, like, and if I watch it, I made that decision. I'm a human being with agency. You know, and like. I made the decision to watch the show that I didn't like. Like they tried their best.
And maybe it wasn't for you.
Not for me. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So so we're gonna get started. We should probably get going. But so just the way that works is you guys, I sent you both the thing. Dave, you've seen it before, but I sent you kind of the rundown of how it might work. And then, I like to leave it a little bit fluid. So if you want to stop me as I'm telling the story to ask a question, or you've got like something funny that you want to do, or just like feel free to do that. Don't feel like you're going to be jumping in on that. And also, I do, Charlie, just start off by asking like what's your history with this? So I'll ask you, like, you know, did you grow up with this? Did you grow up with any kind of faith-based background or whatever? And then, and then
what's your history with this story, or with the Bible?
Not necessarily this particular story, because this one's pretty obscure,
right?
But like, but just in general, like, so Dave, I know a little bit better. So I know Dave grew up in kind of the evangelical church, similar to what I grew up in, and has these stories as part of his thing. You know, like Noor Hadidi was on, so we talked about a story that she had heard, a Muslim version, but she hadn't, you know, like, so all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll just take it from there, if that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I will clap us in, and then this will turn into our technical podcast as soon as we're done. So yeah, Mom, stop texting me.
That should be the start.
Let's go. Welcome. Thank you. Welcome to Holy Shit. My name is Dan Taylor. This is your first time here. You are in for a treat. This is a story wherein I tell a Bible story to some friends, and then we talk about the Bible story and try and make some sense of it in our contemporary world. And then at the end of it, we ask the basic question: should we toss this story? Should we tame this story? Should we turn this story up? And this is the 5th episode, and we are very excited to have some good friends here. So first guest, amazing friend of mine, stepping in at the last minute is Dave Ray. Welcome, Dave Ray.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dave Ray got the call 50 minutes ago and was doing and either stopped what he was doing or was doing nothing.
I was actually in a meeting with my comedy group, and I was like partway through the meeting, I'm like, we're not going to have a show in several months, so goodbye. And then I just
So, for those of you that are listening to this, Dave Ray graciously stepped in for comedian Noor Kidwai, who was supposed to be on, and he hurt his back and is now at a hospital to deal with his back, which is a choice at this period in time. Like, if you because I've had this where I've like hurt a thing. I hurt my knee the other day, and I'm like, is this hospital worthy knee? And I decided no. But Noor like sent me a picture from the hospital. So prayers or thoughts or whatever you have, good feelings, send them Noor's way as he recovers from back injury. I'm also very excited about our next guest, Canada's sweetheart.
Yeah.
Put your hands together for Charlie Demers.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
I have a weird thing with your name because the first time I heard your name, Steve Patterson was saying it, introducing you to the debater on the debaters. So whenever I say your name, I hear Steve Patterson's voice.
Yeah, and Steve is I mean, it's one of these unique situations where I've known Steve and known him well for a dozen years, and he always says my name wrong, and I don't like it. It's a very like we're very good friends, and I just but yes, at least it's a nice voice to hear when you hear my name.
Okay, then I got it wrong too. How are you?
Well, no, you actually said it. You actually said
good.
it right. He always one of the problems is he has drift between possible pronunciations, but it's one of those things where it is. I mean, it's a word that is mispronounced in any language because it's a Quebecois name that's in French but is mispronounced by the rules of French from France French. Right. So my cousin once had a fight with a substitute teacher from France who was reading the attendance sheet and said Josiane Demers, and Josiane said Demers, and the teacher said no, Demers. Only people from France will correct you on the pronunciation of your own last name. But you just kind of you pick your preferred anglicization, and so we've always in my family we've gone with Demers, but there's an accepted spectrum that I think runs from Demers all the way to Demers, right? And then you get outside of that spectrum into the Demirses and the those are the ones where I think, well, now you're creating with what we've given you. Like, there's no Demirs organic or indigenous to the name.
And you also go with Charlie, and I mean, you have Charles up here, but like you seem to use Charles and Charlie a little bit interchangeably. And I was talking about this with Charles Haycock long ago, that I love the name Charles because it has an indeterminate number of syllables. Like,
yes.
Like, it's either one or it's two, and no one can be quite sure at any time how many. Definitely. It is the Y of vowels to consonants of mono to duosyllabic names. It is. So Charles was chosen by my parents because my dad, like I said, Quebecois. My mother was Anglophone, and they wanted a name that could easily go into either language. And they loved every iteration of Charles or Charles or Charlie or Charlot. Right. The only name that they didn't like that was derivable was Chuck. Right. Which they said he'll never be Chuck. And then in T-ball, I was given a hat that said Chucky, and I was called Chuck from grade 1 to university because of that T-ball hat. Well, I was about to say, I don't see you as Chuck, but then I've never seen you in a baseball cap.
No, it's true.
It's a new person, yeah.
Yes. It's a real, like, you commit to a more sort of bowling alley aesthetic with the, but I do think Chuck Demers, it's a pretty good comedian name. It may be even, better than what I've got, but At this point, when somebody calls me Chuck, it's just like a finding an old picture. Like it's just a nice warm reminder of a former part of your life.
I could definitely imagining opening for Chuck Demers at like a charity show in Rimbey, Alberta.
Yes.
Yeah.
A comedian completely untouched by wokeness. Like he's not even bitter about it. He hasn't even heard that it's happened.
Yeah, he's not anti-woke. It's not like
Yeah.
like,
Nobody
not-
sat him down. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not gonna hold it against you that you're
Yeah.
Greek. That's
Yeah.
like Chuck Demers.
yeah, just completely untouched by time and
Yeah.
taste.
like a
Yeah.
like a comedy fossil.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get going on the story, but I want to ask you guys first, like, so Bible stories are sort of in the ether, but I think that the further we go along, there's a lot of people that didn't grow up with these at all, like have very kind of sporadic experience of Bible stories. So what about you guys? I'll start with you, Dave. Did you kind of like, I know you well, so you grew up with this, right?
Yeah,
And are originally from rural Manitoba, where the
you have
Bible
to.
was written.
Yeah, you're born with a Bible in your hands. Like that's what they. So I grew up with all of these stories, and even this one, like this one's kind of like one of those things where like I remember it, kind of like. Do you know about the one where she puts a
No spoilers.
It's been out for a few thousand years, Dan.
It's been a
If we
Veggie
can
Tales.
talk about
Yeah,
how
point.
Friends ended, we can talk about how the Bible goes.
it hasn't had its own Veggie Tales episode yet, although it would be.
Oh
best-
man.
Yeah.
How about I'll say it like
Yeah.
this.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll say it like this. I'm familiar with the Bible and where this comes from, the book of
Yeah.
Judges.
Right.
I'm familiar to it to the point that I know that Judges is like the hardcore. If there was a season of 24 set in the Bible, it would be in Judges time, where it's just like it's gruesome and gory and it's awesome. That for just how brutal it is. So that's why I'm familiar with this story coming in. Even though I actually don't know really what it's about or why why this happened. So
Right. That's interesting. So, so you kind of grew up in the Christian faith. How about you, Charlie? What did you grow up with? Although you're all frozen right now.
How am I now?
It's you, Dan.
It's me. Okay.
Uh,
Should we make that face?
I just
you're all back.
okay, beautiful. I think the reason that this story hasn't been made into a Veggie Tales is because of its focus on dairy in the story itself.
wrong food group, yeah.
So I am. I guess I grew up with what's called a cradle Anglican. So in the Anglican Church, because Anglicanism is one of those denominations with compromise sort of baked right into it. A lot of people end up in the Anglican Church from a lot of different churches. So you meet a lot of people in the Anglican Church who are coming this way out of Catholicism or that way out of the Evangelical Church, and enough so that if you are talking to people about their history in the church, the term cradle Anglican will come up for people who, like me, were baptized as infants into the Anglican Church. The plan originally was for me to grow up Roman Catholic. My dad grew up Catholic, French Canadian, moved to British Columbia from Montreal. And my parents met with the same priest who converted Margaret Trudeau to Catholicism before she married Pierre.
Oh, wow.
And apparently this guy was just so rude to my mother, um, that like just stacked up this pile of books in front of her and said to my dad, "This is what she has to read." Incidentally, I mean, the differences between Catholicism and Anglicanism, you could cover them in a tweet. Like, they are not, you do not, there's no stack of books necessary. I digress. She just said, okay, we're not doing that. So instead, my dad just said, oh, well, I'll become Anglican. And by become Anglican, what he meant was, we would go to an Anglican church, but he would not learn any of the differences. So I grew up going to an Anglican church, but any question I asked my dad about church, I got the Catholic answer for, wherever there was a difference, which was very seldom.
Okay.
So there was definitely like, I understood, I had the children's illustrated Bible, as a kid, and there were Bible stories that, you were kind of aware of, even if you couldn't remember, like, did I hear that at Sunday school? Did I like pick it up in the culture, just sort of by osmosis?
Right.
And then you have that kind of, you have that thing because of the names, Old Testament and New Testament, you have this idea in your head of like this book that's split like roughly halfway down the middle. And then you encounter the Bible as an adult and you're like, oh, all the stories are from the Old Testament. There's like a couple of, here's a few things like kind of at the end. They're
Most
important.
of the fun stuff anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the big stories that you remember. So I was not really, in my teenage years, drifted away from the church. And really kind of was not having anything at all to do with spiritual questions or endeavor, but in my kind of secular and political commitments would still kind of come up against a lot of the same. So I was very interested in the Middle East. I did a degree in Middle Eastern history and Islamic studies, and so was always kind of still focused on that part of the world and a lot of those same issues. And then kind of in I would say my late 20s began a sort of slow process of circling back around church and have been back as a regular and very sort of involved person for the last few years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
it's interesting, like, because especially with this story, as much as it is like there's in the story that we're going to talk about today, there's a obviously one extremely violent incident, but there is like a political aspect to this that I find very interesting, and I think that your kind of history with some of the politics and stuff is going to be helpful for us to bring out. So it's
the only story in the Bible where a temple gets destroyed, and it's good news.
Exactly. Okay, so strap in, and imagine all of the characters being played as vegetables, and we will get into the story. So, like Dave said, this story takes place.
Please tell us which vegetable is who as we go.
I'm gonna have to cast this afterwards. That's where I'm focused.
Okay.
Right. That's a
That'll
better
be the game
thing.
that we play halfway through, because I always like to take a break halfway through. Is like Dave will walk us through like what vegetables are we, and they don't have to be vegetables from the famous show. We can cast our own vegetables as various different characters in the story. So we'll take a break halfway through and do that. So this story takes place in the time of Judges, and if you've been listening the whole time, this is sort of an in-between time in the stories that we're talking about. So this is after Abraham, long time after Abraham, long time after slavery in Egypt. People have just come out of that, and they're living in what we would now think of as the Israel-Palestine, that kind of Near East area. But it's prior to them really kind of forming a kingdom in any way that we would recognize. And kind of the thesis statement for this story, which is in the book of Judges, is that in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as they saw fit. And even more than that, as we've talked about before, the way that the people who were given this story understood themselves is that they believed that what made them different from other people is that their God had given them a Torah, a law or instruction of how to operate in the world. So when they say that everyone did as they saw fit, that meant that they weren't following the instruction that they had been given. And the law, the Torah, the instruction outlined blessings and curses. And the blessings were that if you followed God and did what he told you to do, you're going to go okay. If you don't follow God and don't do what he told you to do, then you're going to get oppressed and crushed by other people. That was the rule that was laid out for them. So this whole series of stories where this story takes place is in this in-between time where like nobody's really in charge, everything's sort of confederated, and different areas of geographically are getting oppressed at different times based on their own adherence to this instruction that had been given to them. So at this particular time, at this particular and so if they so basically the story is this series of they follow God, they stop following God, they get crushed by an outside tribe or group of people who oppress them and treat them badly. They cry out to God, they start listening to God again. He raises up a charismatic leader beats the crap out of the old people, sends them away, and then for a period of time they follow the Lord until that charismatic leader either dies or fucks up, and then then the whole cycle repeats itself again. So
that really is a healthy chunk of the Old Testament that you've just described.
Yeah.
Pretty recurring theme.
Yeah. That you could argue, and some scholars would, that is the overriding theme of everything. Is that
the Groundhog Day of Scripture?
Yeah, absolutely.
Although there's no monarch, that was the big thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that basically what we're being given is that this was a very anarchic period of time. Even more anarchic, like we live in nation states with like rule of law and all that kind of stuff. So for us, anything without like a cop on every corner telling us what to do feels anarchic, right? But this was even anarchic for the time, it would seem, you know. If I'm saying, I'm probably saying the word anarchic wrong, but like it was
no. Like you're talking about the South Pole, right?
Yeah, it's very cold.
Yes,
it's very cold.
Many penguins.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where the aliens landed. Okay. So at this point, during this period of time, various places and geographical areas would be run by people that they called judges. And basically a judge's job was to just settle people's disputes. They were a third party that everyone would listen to. And the judge at this point in time unusually was a woman named Deborah. Now, Deborah was also a prophet. So not only was she kind of the strong arm leader of this group of people in terms that they trusted her to provide legal judgment for their land disputes or their property disputes, or this guy killed my cow, or this guy's oxen attacked my goat, you know, that kind of stuff. But also she was a prophet in that she told people what the Torah said. That was the job of a prophet, was to outline that. So at that point in time, Deborah was in charge, and she would sit in the hill. She had a place where she would sit in the hills, and people would come and they would seek her wisdom and her counsel and her judgment. Imagine Judge Judy, only not evil. And so at one point, Deborah calls a gentleman named Barak to come see her. His name just happened to be Barak. It's a relatively common name in other parts of the world.
Yes, but where was he born?
Definitely from Kenya.
Yes.
Well, he would have been called a Cushite. He's not called a Cushite. So everyone from Africa was a Cushite in the Old Testament. That's the rule. Doesn't tell us that specifically. It's just a common name. Anyway, so but she calls Barak, and she does something very interesting. Because she's got, the story says that she's got this conduit to God and she's the judge. She calls Barak to her. She gives him an audience and says, "Hasn't the Lord told you that you're supposed to raise an army to fight off our current oppressor?" See, at the time, the people were oppressed by a leader named Jabin. His parents had been killed by the Israelites when they were first invading from the desert. So he didn't like them very much and was mean to them. And he had a military leader, the most famous military leader at the time, named Sisera, who apparently controlled an army of 900 iron chariots. So that is and there's some people who would argue that that's a ridiculous number. It's hyperbolic. It's exaggerated. I don't know that. I don't know how many chariots is too many chariots, but Jabin had at his disposal the largest army in the area. He had military might. So, and as such, people were afraid of him. So Deborah talks to Barak and says, "Hey, didn't God tell you that you were supposed to raise up an army to fight this guy and that he would deliver him into your hand?" Which is interesting because it's an interesting literary thing that is happening in this ancient story where she knows something. We're learning that something has happened with him through her. Anyway, I just find that fascinating. That's outside of the story. Let's stick to
this is how my wife phrases all of what she wants me to do around the house as well.
Hasn't God tell you
to? Yeah.
I don't remember reading that before right now, though. It's the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So Barak, so Barak says he agrees with her. He doesn't try and pass it off, but he says, "If you come with me, I will go and raise this 10,000 person army that you want, and go against Sisera, but and Jabin. But if you don't come with me, then I won't go." And Deborah says, "Okay, I'm coming with you. But know that because you didn't go on your own, the glory for this battle will not go to you. The glory for this battle will go to a woman because patriarchy." Even then, it existed. So they do this. Barak and Deborah go and they gather their 10,000 person army on Mount Tabor, the way that God had instructed them to do, and they wait there. Now, as he's gathering the army, there's this character that we meet named Heber the Kenite. And Heber the Kenite seems to be a part of Israel initially, a part of that group of people, but he has separated himself from that tribe and has sided with Jabin. And because he's still in both camps in a certain way, he then goes and tells Jabin and consequently Sisera that Barak has started to gather an army around him with Deborah at Mount Tabor, and they're preparing a revolution. So we're going to stop and take our break right now and start to address the vegetable nature of the characters of the story. So Dave, you've been keeping track.
I've been trying to keep up. There's 5 characters that I need to come up with. To be honest, I only have one so far that a good name, and I'm going to once again lean on like later on VeggieTales where they started having like not just vegetables, because like they had Madame Blueberry, right? Like that's not a vegetable.
That was actually the 3rd episode, but
that was the 3rd episode.
Yeah, I've read a lot of Wikipedia on VeggieTales about like which Bible stories to present in which order to appeal to stoned college students. So
fair. I have not put in that much effort. So here's the thing. If Deborah is supposed to be a judge, I've decided that in this story, she would be called Judge Bread. And I think, once again, to underline that this is a merciless story, right? So I think you got to lean into that. So I think you go with the Sly Stallone look for her.
Yeah.
And this loaf of bread. I think that's where you start.
I mean, it has the grain of truth.
It has the grain of truth.
For sure.
Now the rest of it, I don't know how I'm going to. I'm not a big pun guy, and I feel that you really need to lean on puns throughout the rest of these names. So that's where I'm currently at.
So the next is Barak, right? That's Barak. The next character. Or yeah. So we'll start with Barack. What vegetable do we think Barack could be? I mean, I could have had, like, in my mind, you could have him played by an asparagus and do a little bit of the Obama cadence and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, both being relatively tall and slender. I don't know how you guys feel about that, or
Mhm.
I'm relatively unfamiliar with VeggieTales, but would they not go with broccoli? Like that just seems.
Ooh,
Oh,
yeah,
you
yeah.
got it. You're on
I
it.
see what you did
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
yeah.
I think maybe they would just keep it Barack. Like I think they'd still do that, but it would be Barack.
Oh, but he would
It
be
would
broccoli.
be a broccoli.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Barack,
Okay,
Barack-
we're getting somewhere.
it would be Barack Ali in the same way that like Muhammad Ali, you know, like that's how.
Yeah.
That's how he would even show up in the boxing show.
Yes,
So
Barack
and then Judge
Ali.
Dredd would be like, "Didn't God tell you to go fight this guy?" And he'd be like, "I didn't want to go fight that guy. If you come with me, I'll fight him." Okay, so now we have Jabin, the oppressor, and Sisera, his military captain.
Right. Now, for no other reason, well, this is a hinting later. I think I want to make sure I get this right. I think Sisera should probably be a pomegranate. For no,
Okay.
Ooh, just for visual.
Oh,
for visual sake.
foreshadowing.
that's
Yeah.
foreshadow right there.
Yeah.
I'm
That
picking
way
up
you
what
can
you're
still
putting
keep
down.
the visuals.
And I think it's okay that he's a fruit because he's definitely going to end up a vegetable.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
That's why this man has 1,000 CBC appearances.
Oh boy.
Oh man, that's the jokes that sell in rural Maine.
Yeah, I'm plugged into that ecumenical zeitgeist.
We've still got Jabin, the maniacal leader, though. We've still got Jabin, the oppressor.
What's it would be played by the like the big bad cucumber, not
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
the one who's like
always
who
the bad
plays
guy.
Goliath.
Maybe. Oh, he's the one that plays Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Yeah, whatever
Yeah,
that one.
Pickle.
I'm imagining somebody a little bit fat. Do they have a cauliflower? Like, I think cauliflower, you could easily make a cauliflower villainous. And I know that it doesn't, there's no pun, there's no sound, there's no, you know, but like,
Maybe you can do a
you would
pumpkin.
just occupy a lot of space like Jabba the Hutt, right?
Yeah, like
Ooh.
Pumpkin, a pumpkin,
Pumpkin.
or some other kind of like a pumpkin has like fruit, but like a gourd or I guess there are gourds.
Gourds.
Um,
Well, you could just use the gourd character, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gourd is good.
Mustache.
Okay.
And who's the guy who goes? Remind me the
Gamer
name.
Key Knight, yeah.
Yeah, that should be eggplant because it tastes like whatever you cook it with.
Right.
So-
yes.
That's a good way.
Yeah, for the guy who wants to play it both ways.
Yeah.
Eggplant.
Yeah. Neighbor just goes where the wind
like
blows.
that.
Yeah.
It's a rough place. That is some fascinating stuff. I like that. Now, Dave Ray actually, in addition to appearing on this show, which he was not supposed to do, but he did. He also wrote a game for the show. Now, I've tried to. He sent me this on Facebook. So, like Dave, I want this show to have an aspect of silliness to it sometimes, and the unfortunate thing is, like a lot of comedians, I'm a pretty serious person. So
Most serious comedian I know. That is true.
so I am going to run this by. So this quiz will be for Teddy and for Charlie, and we'll go through it in this way. So Dave has written these. This is a quiz of strange deaths in the Bible. Okay?
Oh wow.
So I hate.
There are multiple choice at the very least.
Yeah, they're multiple choice. Teddy, go a little bit easy on him because just to warn you, Charlie, Teddy
He
was
seems to know his stuff.
Just to warn you, Charlie, Teddy was the valedictorian of our Christian university.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So,
I would say I've got like pretty good knowledge of the Bible for a comedian.
Now
Pretty-
you're gonna make me look bad if I don't
pretty
do well.
Low knowledge for a Bible college valedictorian. Is where I
Yeah.
would put my. Yeah.
So to be fair, like a Bible college valedictorian probably knows less than your average like evangelical smart camp kid. Like,
It's true. Or like a wanna kid. Or like,
Yeah.
and for the record, like I didn't grow up going to church. Like I don't know all the like kid Bible stories and stuff
like
Right.
from kids.
my oldest child would probably destroy all of you on this, but
Yeah.
just because they're smart and like winning quizzes. I'd put
Motivated.
two of my kids up against you, like all of you, you know. But okay, so this is the quiz of strange deaths in the Bible. Question number 1. In Judges 3, it describes how Ehud went to confront and kill King Eglon of Moab in the upper room of his palace. According to the text, what was the last thing that Ehud said to King Eglon before with the stabbiness and the dispatching him? Does he say, A, verily, I am Ehud of the tribe of Benjamin. The Lord of Israel has seen the evil committed by your hand, and now you will die by mine? Did he say that, or did he say, B, your majesty, I have a secret message for you? Or does he say, C, the Lord of Israel sends his regards?
I'm gonna say A.
I think it's B.
You think it's B?
Yeah.
Dave Ray, you wrote this. In all honesty, I don't know the answer to this.
It's B.
I think it's B. Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's B. Yeah.
It is B. A. I'll be honest. Behind the curtain, I wrote A based off of the line from Princess Bride, and just really Bibled it up.
Well done.
And then C
Convincing.
is just from Game of Thrones.
So Dave was so committed to character, he all caps Lord in A. And I'm the only one reading it. Like, that's how committed Dave was in the writing of it. Okay, question number 2. After Ehud killed the king, he locked the door to the upper room and left. The servants discovered it locked and did not want to go in because A, they did not want to interrupt his meal. B, they did not want to interrupt him having sex with his sister. Or C, they did not want to interrupt him on the toilet.
I remember this story.
Yeah, you go first.
It's one of those 3 things.
I'm very proud of my quiz. Now that I've
Yeah.
seen this in action, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. I want to say A for the meal, but there's something about the specificity of the sister that is jogging something in my memory, and I kind of want to take a big swing.
Okay.
Do it.
But I'm gonna go with meal. I'm gonna say
Okay,
A.
you're gonna go with meal.
Yeah.
Teddy?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It's no
We can
fun.
both say the same answer.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there's no rule against it. It's actually C. They did not want to interrupt him on the toilet.
Ah, that was the
Didn't
third
our
thing I
toilets
was gonna
were
say.
Yeah, that was the third thing.
Yeah.
Actually, this story is really gross because Ehud was really fat, and like when he was
Yeah, I missed the
stabbed,
detail.
the contents of the Bible says the contents of his intestines poured out, which is why they thought that he was on the toilet.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you were jogging my memory with that mnemonic.
Gross. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a buck wild one.
Yeah. Okay, number 3. After Absalom rebelled against his father, King David, he was routed and forced to flee on a mule. However, his pursuers were able to catch him and spear him to death because what happened? Was he A, choking on sacred bread he had stolen from the temple? Was it B, an angel of the Lord made the mule stop and refused to go ahead? Or was it C, his fashionably long hair got caught in the branches of a tree? Do you need me to read them again?
Yeah, we all got really distracted there. I need the question too.
Yeah, no problem. So after Absalom rebelled against his father, King David, Absalom was routed and forced to flee on a mule. However, his pursuers were able to catch him and spear him to death because this happened. Was it A, he was choking on sacred bread stolen from the temple? Was it B, an angel of the Lord made the mule stop and refused to go ahead? Or was it C, Absalom's fashionably long hair got caught in the branches of a tree?
I think it's C.
I think it's B.
You think it's B?
I'm
Okay.
just gonna say B.
The answer is C. His fashionably long hair got caught in the branches of a tree.
These were not in my exit interview.
Teddy, your answer was you're misplacing that with a story from the book of Judges. Sorry, the book of Numbers, where not only does an angel of the Lord make the mule stop, ultimately God opens the mouth of the mule and it tells off its rider that, like, I'm not going ahead because an angel's going to kill both of us. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. In Numbers.
The original wise ass.
Yeah, exactly. Number 4, in 2 Kings 2, a bunch of young lads from the city mocked a prophet of God for his bald head. The prophet then cursed them in the name of the Lord. And how did the 42 children who mocked the prophet die? Was it A, lightning struck them down? Was it B, a couple of bears came out and mauled them? Or was it C, snakes came out from holes in the ground and bit them?
Bears.
Yeah, it's bears. It's bears.
Bears, totally. The other two did happen to other people, though. They weren't mocking prophets for baldness, but definitely,
That's like one of the best stories.
Those other ones happened.
In a book with a tendency towards disproportionate discipline.
Yeah,
that really stands out.
The Bible actually quotes the line that they said to him that was insulting. Does anybody remember the line? I do. I can tell it. But anybody else know it?
I don't.
It's like,
is it like he doesn't have any hair? Like he's bald?
It's the line is "Go on up, you bald head." Go on up, you bald.
Why don't you like that, Dan?
I mean, I guess I wouldn't, like, if a bunch of kids started yelling that at me, I'd probably be like, "Hey, that's weird." But I don't think I'd get to the point where I'd call bears out to maul them to death.
Yes.
And then be satisfying though that God did it.
You know, but even if God was like, "Hey, I can maul these kids with bears," I'd be like, "Let's just back off a little bit."
is that the only option to solve this conflict right now?
Can we give them all COVID-19 instead? Like,
Oh, no.
Okay, last question. In Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira were both struck dead by the words of Peter because they had lied about what? A, they lied about selling their land and claiming that they gave all of the money from the sale to the church. B, they lied about the idols to other gods that they had in their house. Or C, they lied about their son not being circumcised.
You really threw me with the vertiginous testament shift. But yes,
What a word.
I'm with Teddy. It's A.
It is A. It is A. And
but I only say that because I live in Vancouver and everything is about land value.
But I don't think anyone. Oh no, no one died because they lied about their son not being circumcised. I can't remember that specific story. Dave, was there a story about that or?
No, basically, I was just like, does this sound like something could be like it could be in the Bible somewhere? And I mean,
Yeah.
look at the story we just did right before this.
Well, and there is a great story with Moses where Moses like didn't
Yeah.
circumcise his kids, and then like on the way back to Egypt, God suddenly got mad. It's like somebody told him and was like, "Wait a minute, no, your kids aren't circumcised." And then like
Zipporah
Yeah, the
sees
wife.
it, and she just goes and does it, circumcises, and then touches the foreskin to Moses' toe, and
Yeah.
then God's like, okay. And my reaction to that story was like, I don't want to be married to a woman who that's her first response in an emergency. It's I just gotta start.
Immediate circumcision.
Yeah.
a wise man always marries out of his league.
Yes.
And I think Moses definitely did that with Zipporah. And her line is like, "Truly now you are a bridegroom of blood to me." And this is like
To me, when I hear
decades of marriage. I'm like, whoa. My thing is like, I think that there was other things going on in Moses and Zipporah's marriage beyond the lack of circumcision of their children. Yeah. So
The guy had other stuff on his plate too. I mean,
yeah, he was messed up upbringing by any stretch of the imagination. So back in the story. So we get back into the story. So if you remember where we were, Jabin had Haber the Kenite had tipped off Sisera that the armies were gathering. So they go and they start to gather in the river valley below Mount Tabor, and Sisera Barak with Deborah is gathered with 10,000 of their warriors, and they're on Mount Tabor about to attack Sisera and his 900 chariots. So they start to go over, and at one point Deborah turns to Barak and says, "You need to go down and fight them now. Hasn't the Lord already gone before you?" And they go down and fight them. And like all Bible stories, it leaves out any details of the actual fight. Like it's very, like not interested in such things. Like, there's no battle of the bastards here. It's just like, but what the Bible does say is that God panicked the army and that they all fled, and that Sisera jumped down from his chariot and fled on foot. So if you study this, there's some people that believe that they were in a river valley. God panicked them by having like mud come up. 900 iron chariots get stuck in the mud. Fleet-footed mountain warriors are in a better position to fight than our chariot people. That's beside the point. Not important to the story. God panicked them. They take off. Sisera runs. He runs and he escapes for a good long time before he arrives at the tent of Haber the Kenite, and he meets Haber's wife Jael, who says, "You come hide in my tent." She invites him into her tent to hide, and it says that Sisera, the military leader, is exhausted by this point. He says, "I'm very thirsty. Can you give me anything to drink? Do you have any water?" And she gives him milk from a milk skin that she had. And then he says, "I'm going to cover myself up and lie down here. You stand at the door of the tent, and if anybody asks if there's a man here, then tell them no." And Jael, Haber's wife, says, "Of course, I will do that. You just lie down here and hide." And then after he goes to sleep, what the Bible says very specifically is that she picked up a tent peg and drove it and a mallet, and drove the tent peg through his head into the ground until he died. Then later on, Barak shows up looking for Sisera and is like, "Is Sisera here?" And she says, "Yeah, I got Sisera here," and then throws over the thing, and he's there. End of story. For the most part. Except there's two interesting things that I think happen next. One, Deborah, the judge, writes the history of this. She writes it in a poem and a song that we have in the next chapter of the book of Judges. and she describes Jael and her activity in this way. And I'm actually gonna read this. I don't do a lot of scripture readings on this show, but this is worthwhile because this is how Deborah, the prophet and judge, describes what Jael did. It said, "Blessed among women, Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. When asked for milk, she did give in a princely bowl. She served curds. Her hand for the tent peg reached out, her right hand for the workman's hammer, and she hammered Sisera, cracked his skull. She smashed and pierced his temple. Between her legs, he kneeled, fell, lay. Between her legs, he kneeled, he fell. Where he kneeled, he fell, destroyed." That's the end of the story. So the two things that I find interesting is that's a beautiful poem. Most important fact to me that I find interesting is the first sentence she says is "blessed among women is Jael," which I'll get back to in a second. The second thing that I find interesting is that immediately afterwards, the next verse of this poem is making fun of Sisera's mom. Like, the passage right after it is like, "Oh, Sisera's mom is like, why is this chariot taking so long to get home?" Sisera's mom's friends are coming up to her now being like, "Oh, he's got so much plunder. It's taking him so much longer." Like, which I think is hilarious and petty, and I love it. But this is something that I find interesting and needs to be remembered in this. There's only 2 women in the entire Bible that are called blessed among women. Jael, as you've just heard, is one of them. The other one is very famous, and that's Mary, the mother of Jesus. Elizabeth, when she recognizes when Elizabeth, Mary's cousin, when Mary comes to visit her with Jesus in her womb, she says, "Blessed are you among women, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." And I find that absolutely fascinating that there are only 2 women, and one of them is Jael. So this is the story, and now the question is, like, what do we think about this? And I just want to include that blessed among women thing. There's not a lot of women characters in the Bible. That's just that we get to know pretty well, but yet this woman is, and I think that that's an important thing for us to at least recognize as we talk about it.
And the thing about Mary is, and in relation to Jael, I mean, I was brushing up on the story before tonight, and like before having to discuss it, and one of the things that I just found in a quick like Google search on Jael is, and like one of the first things that comes up is an entry for, I think it's the Jewish Women's Encyclopedia or something like that, and the focus in retelling the story after getting through the details of it is about all of the kind of subverted mother imagery that's in the Jael story. Yeah. She gives him milk. He dies between her legs. Like, she is this like reverse mother of badass death dealing in a like this totally like Tarantino vein of like, yeah, I've got Sisera, you want to see him? Like it's really it's like swashbuckling stuff, but with this like very, very loaded like Freudian lodestar of imagery to go along with it.
Yeah, like having read a lot and spent a lot of time with Bible stories, like the Bible doesn't have a consistent relationship with violence. There's times when like it doesn't feel like the writer wants you to enjoy this violence. You know, it doesn't feel like there's times when it's just like, this is just a fact of the matter. It wants you to feel ambivalent about the violence. Whereas like,
this is specific.
And it seems that it's just like, you're supposed to think this is cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is like Quentin Tarantino's, like, or The Wire with Omar or something like that. You're supposed to be like, whoa, this is a badass killer, that we have here. And
the other woman who you can't help but think of in hearing the story is Rahab.
Yeah.
And Rahab is like so passive in comparison to Jael, who like, I mean, Rahab does what she does, takes courage, and she
Yeah.
does have to, like, obviously she's presented with this moral question of like, will I tell the, you know, about the about
Israelite.
Joshua and the Israelites coming over, but it's not in this, it's in this much more sort of passive vein versus like Jael, who like steps up into history with this like very decisive, subtle, and accomplishes what all of these warriors couldn't do.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too when you talk about that, because like the stereotypical kind of woman story in the Bible is really Ruth. Like if they talk about like Old Testament conduct by women, and that's a story of like commitment and loyalty and like I'm going to do the right thing, and at the end she gets a husband. You know, it's like it's kind of Jane Austen-y,
Right.
and yet, and certainly it's been told that way throughout my life. Whereas this is a story that's like either not told at all, you know, in accordance with how women ought to behave, or certainly not told with the same amount of vigor. That this is another aspect of who you are sometimes. Sometimes you raise a tent peg and a workman's hammer and you smash the oppressor's head open, right? And I think that Teddy, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that a little bit specifically. You're the only woman in the Zoom room. Sorry, Mom, we're not letting you talk right now. And but like, what do you think about that?
What do I like about?
Well, just about like this story isn't it told as much as Ruth, and obviously we want more people to be like loyal and caring and get
And
husbands,
like
I guess,
just like put a peg through
than
their
like
enemy's
murder
head.
people with head pegs, you know. Like obviously, like we would choose one over the other, but does that affect? Do you think, like, I don't know, is that a positive or a negative way? I don't know. What does that think? What does that do in your head, heart?
I mean, I think it's unclear because I don't I think that it's not as obvious like what course of action to take in like an enemy and courage, like, because I think that it's courageous. I think that it's like daring. I think that it's brave, and I think that it's also murdering someone. So that makes it a difficult choice to make as a like that in this story, that, you know, like that to be, I don't know that there's a lot of other murdering that then it gets you called blessed among women, right? Like what makes this particular dude so bad that Jael then is like, because do we have other, like there's many other deaths that happen in the Bible that the person who commits it does not get that kind of honor, I guess. And so it seems it's just confusing mostly. Like I found this story really confusing.
Yeah, I mean,
certainly as an example, like to follow.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where Judges is interesting as a book in general, because like it's true that there's not a lot of examples of like someone murdering and it's like, yay, that's really a great thing. But Judges has kind of got a few of them. Ehud, which we were just talking about in our quiz, actually is another example, and it comes right before this story. And there's a few times of like these people who are like these awful oppressors are struck down. And it's like, I think it's probably specific to this context of like during the Judges' time, the nation or these group of people are very vulnerable. And I think it's interesting that that God in the context of this story is like using these people who are often considered in this time frame to be like you know, people you would overlook or you wouldn't assume. Not only does this leader fall to the hand of a woman, but also it underlines Deborah as well. Like it underlines Deborah's thing when she came alongside and pushed Barak to get his army together. And you have like these two chapters together where it's like underlining like how women who are, you know, people undervalue them, and then they're stepping up in such a huge way. And I think that's, you know, in the same way that the Hebrew people are often overlooked, you know, God is using them and stand by them.
But I think it's like, I think, and because I've spent a lot of time with this, I do think it's helpful to look at the Mary thing, right? Because in biblical scholarship, there's a principle called the principle of first mention, which I think is often overused. But the idea being that whenever you hear something said later on in the Bible, you should hearken back to the first time that it was mentioned, because it was intentional, because they would have thought about it, right? So the argument being that when Elizabeth says to Mary, "Blessed among women are you," Elizabeth is saying to Mary, "You're like Jael," right? And so, which changes things, because, you know, we can argue about the dating of the Magnificat, but let's assume that Mary's prayer, which would be recited in the Anglican Church at Christmas time, of about her own the baby that is going to be born inside her. Her prayer there is not about like the salvation of the world through sacrifice. Her prayer is about violent revolution. Her prayer is like, the rich he has sent away empty, the poor he has filled with good things. The powerful are torn down from the thrones, while the lowly are exalted. And I think that, I wonder if it's like, so that makes me go like, okay, so what that makes me think is, did Elizabeth and Mary understand their situation in context of violent revolution against the Romans, who are now oppressing them with a massive military advantage, in the same way that Jabin and Sisera were oppressing Barak and Deborah and the people with an awesome military advantage. And I think that gets uncomfortable, because it subverts even what we think about what does it mean to have a revolution, you know. And I think that this is where, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind getting into some of the political stuff.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think in that context, I think like it's that qualifier of the workman's hammer is very, very important and non-accidental. And I think like what we're seeing in this story, I mean, it's not only the story of because on the one hand, I think like Teddy is absolutely right in the sense that the bare physical facts of the situation are those of a murder, and like a fairly cold and calculated one. This guy's like, literally, he's asleep, and like, after being assured, don't worry, you know, you're cool, like I'll make sure nobody comes in here, I won't tell anyone there's anybody here.
He's been given food, which is sort of like a traditional, like, you're safe here.
And
it's a very Games of Thrones style death. Like, it's a very like, oh, you think you're okay until you're not okay.
Totally. But what you're also seeing in this scene is like war by other means, and you're seeing like this guy who, on the one hand, couldn't be defeated on the field of battle. On the other hand, himself fled the field of battle. Like, this is a failure of both generals on both sides, and where both those kind of captains of their respective armies failed, this woman, armed with the workman's hammer, like, delivers the decisive final blow that is, I mean, that's an act of war, right? And I think there is a context to the killing that is, I mean, you know, then now we open up big questions of you know, is killing in a war or a just war different than killing in any other situation? And I think all of those are fair conversations to have. But I feel like Jael, through this story, is inserted into this conversation as a warrior. Like, she's one of the soldiers of Israel here. And I mean, Judges, this anarchic period is
With
also with
With the penguins, yeah.
yes. And the other thing I think is interesting is that the penguins, it's the males who guard the eggs. And so that because the female penguins are out driving their beaks through the temples of their enemies.
Feels.
This is also like the phase in the story of the people of Israel in the Hebrew scriptures where they're going from being a chosen people unlike any other to about to become just like everybody else. They're going to ask God for a king. He's going to be like, guys, you don't want, I'm your king. I'm your God. Like, and they're going to, no, we want a king. And then all of those kings are going to make them more and more like all of the pagan nations around them until we move into the prophets. And this is in this kind of in between time of, and it's one of the reasons why the stories in the Old Testament are kind of a lot more interesting than a lot of the stories in the New Testament, because they are actually, they ask us to think about them in ways that we think about novels or films, as opposed to the way we think about parables, which is like, what is the lesson to be drawn from this,
right,
versus like, let's bounce around in this crazy and contradictory moral universe that this brilliant writer has created for us.
Yeah. And I think that's so interesting about the Book of Judges, because we talk about, like, we of all kind of over the last however many decades have experienced and grown up with the anti-hero as a thing,
Sure.
like,
yeah
a gray hero. And whereas like, and that didn't really exist through much of literature, but we have that in the Book of Judges, whereas like there's some scholars that would argue that there's no one in the Book of Judges worth emulating, that they're all fallible. And in fact, all the way through the Old Testament, all of Moses, David, all of these people, that there's aspects of them, but all of them have at least one incident where you're like, whoa, like what happened there? So I think it's interesting to listen to this story in the context of that statement, the kind of the thesis statement of the whole Book of Judges, which is, in those days, no one was in charge and everyone did as they saw fit. And I think one of the things it's hard for us to do, especially in North America and the Western world, is that the original hearers and readers and partakers of the oral tradition were always oppressed peoples, right? Like so we do not unfortunately, we don't hear this from the perspective of oppressed people. We just don't, it's very, and I don't know if you've got indigenous background, Charlie, anywhere back there, but like, there's not a lot of ways that we really have to twist to tell our story as oppressed peoples, in a lot of ways. Whereas like, there's people in, like I know in Latin America or Central America throughout the 70s, or in Africa or other places where I've heard scholars talk about this story very, very differently, because they've been under a warlord, they know what it's like to be in a place where if the warlord dies, then like, we live in a place where it's like, who cares if you kill the warlord, the next general is going to step up and it's the same thing over and over again. Whereas like, they come from a world where if the warlord dies, the oppressing army might disperse, and then that's better, right? To have like 5 different warlords fighting is better than having one, right? So I think that this is really hard for us to do. And one of the really negative things about Christianity, specifically in North America and the West, is that like, we have all of these stories about oppressed people that we hear as the oppressors, and we're like, that's us. We're totally like, yeah, we're put upon. And it's like, no, actually, like, we need the ones that they're yelling about, the ones that are constantly in danger of hellfire and brimstone and like we are the ones that are like that, right? Like, I think that's a gap, and I just find this story absolutely fascinating because there's a part of me that would love to be a pacifist, right? There's a part of me that really, empathizes with that Anabaptist tradition of absolute nonviolence, and there's and when they talk about like, well, Jesus was nonviolent, I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. However, I do think that sometimes people in the world, I think that this story is for people in the world, this story is for people who live in a world gone insane, and I think that there's stories for those people too, where there are no right answers. I don't know what you guys think about that, but.
Well, I think there's a strong through line in the Bible where it's just like if there is a need for change, you need to go through with that change. Tear down the Asherah poles and get rid of everything that you held dear, and come follow me. Like there's so many examples of like sometimes a big change is needed and put upon us, and I think where wisdom comes in and is knowing when to do that. So when you take this story in the context as well as so many other stories, it's like, is this a moment where we're supposed to do something drastic? Now, our drastic today may not be putting a tent peg through somebody's head.
The official stance of the show is we are against tent peg murders as a general rule. Like just
I consulted legal.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing. Like I if you think of Jael in this moment, like it would have been so easy to just this person's not going to harm me. I'm not even opposed to this person. She was the wife of the neutral person, so she just had to stand by and watch the oppressor get away. She could have just, and she would have been fine, but she took that moment to do a thing that she that was going to hopefully help these people. But I don't know. I think that's why these kind of stories are this kind of story is important also when it's compared to the more peaceful stories, because I think you need to have this kind of frame of where are we talking, to have extremes to talk about, whether or not you agree with how far she went or not or whatever. That's where I think a lot of the stories in the Old Testament, their big role is to get you to think about it and push us to consider these things.
Well, just to quickly, there is a reluctance to embrace the fact that she does murder this guy, because I remember telling this story once and having a lady in my church be like, do you think that maybe she did it by accident?
And that accident made her blessed among women, like Mary.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. I don't want to leave this quite yet. So I'm just look, I need to put up the tent. Well, guy's already in the tent, but I know, but we need another tent
within the tent.
Within the
off
tent.
The balance. And if we don't get another peg, then you can see the sky. We did.
Yeah, he had a mosquito on his temple.
Only one way to deal with that.
Yes.
She meant to pick up the newspaper. Oops.
Yeah.
And then all the way through his head into the ground.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Anyway, sorry, I almost got super dark, but anyway.
I think that's still the other thing. To get back to her relation to her husband. That's the other thing that's kind of special about Jael is she is not an extension of her
Mm.
spouse. Like, she does not belong to her husband in the sense that he has chosen this kind of duplicitous version of neutrality in this situation, and she casts her lot in with the
Right.
people of Israel, like in a very decisive way.
Yeah.
I mean, that does go back to like that, like the scripture in James where it's like, don't be lukewarm, don't be lukewarm,
Yeah,
like,
that's yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, be hot or cold. You know?
Yeah, dinner with Giles and Habar the next night was maybe a little bit. So all the way.
Look, I just don't know why you had to do it in the tent itself. Because
Like
we also stay in here though. Like,
we just bought those Egyptian cotton sheets. I thought you liked those sheets. They had a really high thread count, and
It was on the ground.
I just wish you had told me beforehand. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying
I'll wash the sheets.
I'm not saying you can't kill a warlord in the tent. Just
is what I'm saying.
heads up.
Yes.
So we're running low on time, but I want to ask this final question because I think I want to give some time to answer this properly because I think that this is a really interesting story. Tame it, which means like let's make a version of this story that works for our time. Do we toss it, never tell this story again, or do we need to turn this story up louder? That this needs to be an aspect of the stories that we tell because it makes us ask some important questions about who we are as human beings. So I'll start with you, Dave. Tame it, toss it, turn it up.
I think it's just like a lot of these really challenging stories in the Bible. I think they need to be turned up, especially in the Christian context, where it's just like I think there are some really interesting, challenging things in here that especially in North America, where as you said, we are in the position of oppressor more often. Especially like folks like ourselves, we're more in the oppressor camp, and so hearing these kind of stories and not shying away from them is important, I think. And so I think it's turn it up. I mean, once again, I think a lot of these stories do best in context of conversation.
Right.
It might be difficult to do this in a sermon, but unless you have like the right, finesse with it. But I think it's a good one to have discussions about.
Yeah.
So turn it up.
What about you, Charlie?
I mean, I feel like the answer is almost always turn it up in the sense of like virtually everything in the Bible, when given its proper context, particularly historically, but historically, religiously, scripturally, textually, literarily. I mean, I just feel like whenever we find ourselves scratching our heads at the Bible, I forget. It's like one of the things that comes up in like creative writing instruction is like the difference between mystery and confusion. And the one being good and the other being bad. It's fine as a writer of a screenplay or a story to create a sense of mystery. What you don't want is to create a sense of confusion. Right. And likewise, I think leaving ourselves as readers of scripture with a feeling, with a profound sense of mystery, of deep ambiguity about what certain lessons of the Bible will mean. Mm-hmm. This story, I guarantee you, could be read by the most fundamentalist Israeli settler as the reason she should be in the West Bank, and by the most hardcore Palestinian liberation, like we need to drive out the oppressing army. Like they both could read the story of Jael and see it as their story and potentially be drawing with relatively equal legitimacy on the different emphases and dynamics of the story based on.
So you're saying I should have invited Jess Solomon and Iman El Husseini on the show together?
Yes,
Like
yeah.
that would have
You
been?
really blew it. Is what
I
I'm
missed
saying.
it.
From a
We're just in
from a
Montreal
booking
now, getting
perspective. Yeah, but I guess I just feel like, yeah, almost always whenever you peel back the bits that are left out of these stories, it almost always enriches the conversation. And I just feel like it's as with almost everything else in the Bible, you get so much more out of it when instead of looking for what is the specific instruction for my life right now, is what is this text giving me as a partner in discussion and something to wrestle with and something to take seriously enough in my life to actually engage it. So I mean, I think it's a brilliant story.
Yeah, and it's always I think you're right, and I mean that's the whole reason the show exists, is for that principle of like let's take these stories seriously. Let's like you know, I think the tendency that we've had is, and I'm an evangelical church person, but and those are my people and I love them, but we have had a tendency to bowdlerize and to sanitize the text that I think has been bad for us. I think it's led us further away from God rather than closer to God. And Teddy, I'll ask you the same question because you've been contributing. Like, do you tame it, toss it, turn it up? What do you? Because I get the last word because it's my show.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's never the right answer to tame it. Like, I guess there's the part of me that there's still like, well, I don't always know, like, when to murder somebody.
Right.
But I also think that it's like when, like, to be courageous and stand up for an oppressed people, right? Like when you have the opportunity to step in and do something brave and, you know, like I think that clearly, I mean, it was the right move in retrospect.
Well, and I think with so many times, and I wonder, like, I should talk to my more educated women's studies friends about this in terms of like women's literature, but so there seems to be a theme in the Bible that when women show up, it's for such a time as this. It's just like dudes can show up at opportune times or inopportune times or just whenever. We're just around. But like the stories that we have about women in scripture tend to be them being like, if I don't do something, disaster comes, right? And that's Esther, that's Jael, that's Mary, that's, you know, all of these stories that we have. And I wonder if that's part of it too, is conveying to us that for people who historically have had fewer choices, this time we see them like making a risky choice, you know, like, I don't know. I wonder if that's part of the themes that we should be looking at as well. But I'm with you guys. I'm like, there's times when I'm like and I gotta admit, Charlie, I'm not always a turn it up person, because like last week with the story of Abraham and Isaac, there's definitely a part of me that wants to tame that story because I don't know what to do with it, right? Like I don't like that. I don't like the questions that story asks me to ask about morality and God and submission and sacrifice. And I think that God is intentionally putting me in that uncomfortable place, but I don't like going there. Like I get the instinct that but this one I definitely feel like I want to turn up, mostly because I think I think powerful, oppressing people ought to be more afraid. And I think we should be telling more stories where the powerful end up with their pomegranate heads sprayed all over the inside of a tent, because I don't think enough of them realize that could happen to them. You know, I want the the Jeff Bezoses, the political leaders that'll get me arrested, but like I want some of our political leadership and the powerful people in our world today to be more afraid than they seem to currently be.
Yes.
but that's my predisposition. So I'm going to call an end right here. If you were only here for the Bible stuff, then feel free to go. Thank you guys so much for being here and being part of Holy Shit. But I have very selfishly one question that I'd like to ask both of you, because you're both Western Canadian comedians, and I just have a fun, and I think this is just a fun thing to share. Do you have a favorite, best, surprising, like rural Western Canadian gas station? We are all people, Dave, like Teddy not so much, but Dave, Charlie, and I have spent a lot of times exploring the bathrooms and coffee selections of gas stations
Yeah.
in rural Western Canada. And often when you walk in, it's exactly what you expect. And it's just like, I'm enduring this, and this is part of the price I have to pay. But every once in a while, you're just like, whoa, like these people went over and above, and this coffee is amazing, and this bathroom smells like almond, and I am loving this experience, and I'm gonna stop by every time I do a show in this godforsaken town. Do you guys have one of those? Just very selfishly, because I think that this is some fun information to share with the world. Like I can go first.
Of like like good ones,
Or it could be like it's horrible, but they have like really surprisingly good coffee.
Right.
Or like
Right.
they have like sometimes they'll have like a sandwich that it's just like, wait a minute, you guys actually make a sandwich here, like with like real
Right.
like this sandwich wasn't made in Vancouver and shipped here, you know. Or sometimes the bathroom is just really spotless. Like it's weird.
Okay.
Because this is where my brain goes because I think of it negatively. I once did a show in a place in rural Alberta that isn't even a town. It's called the Special Areas. It's in the Hannah area, but I stopped at the bathroom in Hannah, and every time I've been to that place, I go to the bathroom, and the bathroom is flickering like I'm about to get murdered in a Prodigy video. Like it is just like flashing on and off, and I'm like, am I having a seizure? So that's the absolute worst, right? Like it's just like,
Yes.
am I going to get out of this bathroom alive? But I have been more so in BC, like kind of central BC. Sometimes you'll get one, and it's just like everything smells like wood, and there's a weird hippie there who's like, I don't trust the government, but I grind my own beans daily.
Yeah.
So
Okay, well, you go first, and I'm gonna try and I'm gonna search the mental archives here as you because you are conjuring images, but I'm just some of them are bled together in my head.
Somewhere between here and Grand Prairie, there is a place where you can stop. And I'm pretty sure, and please don't forgive me, but there's an Asian family that owns it. I'm sure that they're the only Asian family in town. But they make real sandwiches. Like it's imagine Subway but good. And if you ask for a sandwich there, they will make it. And it's just like, and I'm like, and it just blew my mind. 'Cause it's a 6-hour drive, even from Edmonton to Grand Prairie. Like that's a long drive. Dave and I have done it in the middle of the night, coming back from the worst show of either of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know about it then, but then I found out about it later. I can't tell you the exact town or lack of town, but like I just remember they made real sandwiches there, and I was just like, "Thank you, God, for hidden beauties. Like, thank you, God, for dappled things and real sandwiches made in rural Alberta by people who don't have to." You know?
Yeah.
Dave, maybe in the Manitoba side.
I'm trying to think of like the only gas station that's ever stood out to me was there's one in like northern Regina. It's a co-op, and it's just like it gets huge in there. It's like got like all of the chips and all of the snacks Like it's like double the size of any other gas station. I think it's like maybe it's a Co-op or a Husky. It's like one of those like and then they just went whole hog on it. I think there's like a restaurant on the other side, and it's just like, wow, you can get everything, including like a bunch of hunting supplies. I don't know why you need that in the city of Regina, but
about rural gas stations where it's like also the Canadian Tire / grocery store for the whole town.
Yes, but yeah, then they just put it into the city, like they just. As if they had more money, but all they did with it was to get more hunting supplies inside.
Charlie, is anything ringing a bell?
You know, like I'm. It's similarly. I'm flashing on all of these rural places that it feels like unfair to call gas stations because they were also like City Hall and the community center. Like
the ATV.
yeah. But I like
get married and send a wire transfer.
yes, and hunt
and get your hair cut in the back.
Yes, yeah, not right now, but soon. Yeah,
when
tomorrow.
Lorraine comes back, you can get your hair cut.
Yeah, I think it was CarMax in the Yukon. I think it was CarMax, or we were on our way there, or we were or just outside of it. But I think it was CarMax, and it was one of those places where you walk in and it's like none of what's here is impressive on its own, but the fact that it is all available here is really quite wondrous. And like just these like kind of exposed wood shelves, like just this very homey, like this would look exactly like this if I were watching a CBC sitcom about a gas station store in CarMax in the Yukon. It was just exactly spot on. And you can also buy like hats.
Yeah.
Like there's just and it's aimed at this like weird like demographic of people who might be getting their groceries, or also you're a tourist, you're never coming through here again.
Yeah.
So maybe you want like a felt pennant. But that is the gas station that stands out to me.
If you mostly I'm selfishly doing this because like I feel like you've got the juice to pitch this as the CBC Gem Show, where you just like,
yeah,
it's like Johnny Davis's show, except you just visit rural gas stations.
The problem is, if you want to do a show from on CBC where you travel across the country, you have to be from Atlantic Canada. It's one of the rules of the. So Sean Cullen and I we developed a show called "What's That Over There," and where we were going to play these two brothers from Newfoundland who would just drive across the country. He'd go to small town and he goes, "Hey, what's that over there?" And then people would explain it to us. But at one point, you had Johnny Harris, Rick Mercer, and Ron James were all on the air, going to places, expressing delighted surprise.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
Because I'm from Prince Edward Island, so but just like listening to old women like my aunt like whispering about long dead people. Or dad, well, that's where Aunt Marion used to live.
Yeah. yeah. But she died in 1917.
She died. Yeah.
She had a tent peg driven through her tent.
I'm not going to come up with a better way to end the show than that. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a blast. I'd love to have both of you on again down in the
anytime.
Future. And then this is fascinating stuff to talk about. And I will now have to get Jess Solomon and Husseini to do something about the war between the Samaritans and the
yes.
But I've got the perfect story for that. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks
First
a lot.
King 17. Look it up. Spoiler. Thank you guys so much for showing up. It's been a blast to have you. This was awesome to record. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye bye.